welcome. And in the last session, we done the Olivet Discourse, and I touched on the 7 churches there that before the tribulation, that 95 AD, where John wrote it. And I want to do a thing on the 7 churches, and I'm going to start with the first church, which is the church of Ephesus. So we're going to do the church of Ephesus, and what I will do is I will go through all 7 churches. Now, in saying that, it's going to be quite a long, it's going to be a succession. This one I think it's got 3 or 4, because I can only do so long for so much time. But it's got 3 or 4 videos to it, and each church will, because they give a detailed outlay of the church. So be ready for quite a long, a lot of videos coming up. And so let's just get started. So it's the letter to Ephesus, and the word Ephesus is named the desired one, and the Ephesus means the desired one. It's equivalent to darling, the one and only. It's an interesting label for a church. And to us, Jesus is our desired one. Now, I've divided up the scriptures up into different parts. So you'll see I've got, like on this page, I've got title of Christ. So each church has a title that Christ gives. It's what I see as a title of Christ, and each one gives like a commendation. It's like a report card. I've split the churches. Each church has its title. So which title? Because every church Jesus uses a different title. You'll see as we go along, and there's a commendation. So what they're doing right, and then there's a bad. It's like a report card, and what they're doing wrong, and we'll go through it, and you'll get used to the format that I do it in as we go along. But anyway, Ephesus, the desired one. All right. And as I said, it's equivalent to the term darling, or the only one. Alright, so unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write. Now we have this title of Christ. These things saith he, Jesus. We have, like, I think it's 14 letters Paul wrote, and 7 other letters other people wrote, and things like that. If we go and study the Bible, I'll do a thing on it at some stage. But Jesus wrote 7 letters. He done it through Paul, through John. But Jesus also writes. He writes the 7 letters to the 7 churches. So anyway, and this in each church, interestingly enough, he uses a different title, and you'll see it as we go along. In John 1, in Revelations, in chapter 1, if you read chapter 1 through, then you'll see he at some stage he tells you what the 7 stars are in his right hand, and the 7 golden sticks are the 7 churches, and the 7 stars are the 7 spirits of the 7 churches. All right. So you can go and read that on your own time, and you can do a bit of background. But the paradox here, because these things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 gold candlesticks. So the paradox here that we get is, he is the desired one. Jesus being our desired one. He walks among us, but yet he still holds us within his nail-scarred hands. Saith that hold the 7 stars in his right hand, but yet he walks in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. So he's holding us, but he's still in the midst of us. Right. So the thing, if you go through the Bible and as you do your studies, you'll come to realize one thing, that Jesus is in control of everything. God is in control of every single situation. He even allows some situations to be pushed forward or backwards. He's complete control. You understand? It's like when Judas betrays him. We know from the scripture that the Jewish priests and that, they came together. They didn't want to do it over the Passover because it was a festival, a feast. And they were scared, afraid of the people would cause an uprising and the Romans would react. So they didn't want to do it over the Passover, but Jesus does. He pushes it, because when he goes to the upper room and they have the last meal, he says to Judas, "You're the one who's gonna," and he dips the thing in his wine, and he causes Judas to push that timetable forward. So, and even when they're in the garden, who answers? Because they say, "We're looking for Jesus," and he says, "I am he. I am the one you're looking for. Let these go." Basically, they don't have anything to do. You come for me. Here I am. He doesn't cause the situation to escalate or anything. So he's in control all the time. And that's what we will realize as we study the Bible, that Jesus is in control of every situation. Right? And anyway, we'll carry on. So in the next verse he says, "I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles, are not, and hast found them liars, and has borne and has patience, and for my name's sake has labored and has not fainted." So there's seven commendations here. There's 7 stars and 7 candlesticks, and you can do with that whatever you want to. But you'll, after a while, if you study Revelations, you will learn that you cannot count the number of times that things work out to 7. Apparently it's impossible to make a list of all the 7s, because the more you get into it, the more you see the 7s, and you have to go in so deep that it starts becoming so supple. You have to be so sensitive. It'll take a long time to pick it up. We'll highlight some as we go along in the churches and that. But anyway, so he starts his commendation to the church, and he says, "I know thy works." He knows our works. He knows our labor. He knows our patience. He knows we can't bear them which are evil. He knows those tried, which they say, those who say they are apostles and are not, has found them out to be liars. This is the church of Ephesus. They actually did test every word that came into the church. You will see as we go along, Paul actually told these guys before this time. He actually told these guys he spoke to the leadership, and they tested everything according to the Word of God. All right, and you will come to realize how these guys tested every single person when they spoke, when they gave a word, whatever. They tested everything because it had to go back to the Bible. And they bound it in the scriptures to get it. So testing doctrines, we know from these, you will see in this, Paul's farewell warnings, his farewell to the Ephesian elders in Acts 20:25-31, also 2 Corinthians 11:14 and 50, 1 Thessalonians 5:20-21, and not only Paul. You understand? He gave the warning to the elders of the church. We'll look at those. But first, John also gave warnings. 1 John 4:1-3 and 2 John 9:10. But first we're going to look at, there are 4 levels of application. Let's start with the local picture. There really was a church called Ephesus, and founded in 1400 BC with an early temple to an ancient Hittite fertility deity who later became identified with Diana, Tacitus. Ionian colonists from Athens settled there about 1100 BC. 6th century BC, the Lydians captured the city. In 541 BC, Croesus, their king, was routed by the Persians, and Ephesus was joined to other cities in the Ionian Confederation. It was at this time that the tutelary deity became identified with Diana or Artemis. Ephesus was involved to its own disadvantage in the Peloponnesian and Persian wars between those times, and served as a key naval base. In 334 BC, it fell to the Macedonians under Alexander. After his death, Marcus became master of the city and had a great improvement. It was a very beautiful city. You'll see as we go along and do the geography and the history of it and things like that, you'll see it was an extremely beautiful city. Ephesus unwisely sided with, and they always chose the wrong battles, sided with Antiochus of Syria against the Romans. Eventually became the Roman capital of the province of Asia. It's Turkey today. But as a free city, Ephesus had its own municipal government and senate. Strabo and Josephus write about that. So you can go and study there. Let's see. Ephesus was called the Queen of Asia, proud capital of Ionia and chief harbour of proconsular Asia. It had a very good harbour. It was the Romans that destroyed it because they took down all the trees, and what that called was erosion. And it started filling. There was erosion in the harbour, and it started filling, and it started making it not anymore a key naval base. It lost its capacity as a key harbour or naval base. Still used, but they had problems using it. Today it's 6 miles inland, the harbour. It's interesting how Paul would target his activities at major crossroads. He was very shrewd in his practice. It was an extremely wealthy and beautiful city located near the mouth of the river Cayster, now Lower Meander. It was the principal line of communication between Rome and the eastern provinces. One major road eastward through the pass to Sardis and then to whatever and beyond. A second led to Magnesia and up the valley of the river Meander to Iconium, and a third ran through Colossae and Laodicea to the Euphrates. Right, so we can see that's just the island of Patmos where John was. But that's Ephesus there. That was the harbour, basically like a natural harbour. So that's Ephesus, and it's in Turkey, what they call Asia. Asia, whatever. But it's the Asia is known as Turkey today. Alright. The priests, let's see, the architecturally superb theatre was 495 feet in diameter and held 25,000 people. Acts 19, you can find it. The marble way, lined with statues and fountains, ran from the temple of Artemis through the city to the Magnesia gate. The Arcadian way, another main road from the theatre to the harbour, was 1,735 feet long and 70 feet wide, lined with columns and shops and illuminated at night. The first bank in the world, there's a bit of conflict on that, but let's just take it as it is here. The first bank in the world functioned at the temple under the chief priest. The priests of the god Diana were major international bankers. And if you go there, the digs are extensive. Right, this is the main way down to the library. The main road down to the library, and the brothels on this side somewhere. And this is the library. This library apparently held 200,000 volumes of books, and that was before printing. It's like amazing. Handwritten, basically, obviously scribed in that. To the right here is the road, and there were shops and brothels to this road. Archaeologists found that in the library they had there was a secret tunnel from the library to the brothels. So prominent people obviously went to the library, and very lawyers and stuff and whatever. So obviously, if your husband went to the library or was booked into the library, it was cause for suspicion. Too much. This is the amphitheater or the theater, and so I saw some aerial views of it. There are some aerial views. You can go look them up. It's an amazing place to go and see. The Temple of Diana. The Temple of Diana, the most outstanding architectural feature was the Temple of Diana, daughter of Zeus, sister of Apollo. The Temple of Diana, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 4 times as large as the Parthenon at Athens, stood on a platform 425 feet by 220 feet. The building itself was 340 by 165 feet with 127 iconic columns, each 60 feet high. By anyone's standard, it was an impressive piece of architecture. All right, and there was ecstatic sexual rites took place at the temple, involving both male and female prostitutes. Yeah, you can go read that yourself on that. It was discussed in some of the things. Then the New Testament period. Ephesus was the largest city of its day. As the harbour gradually became unusable, traffic diverted to Smyrna. Ephesus was the centre for the study of arts and magic. It was renowned over the world for talisman, incantations, books, charms, etc. There are a lot of things in it. You can read about it. The burnings in Acts 19 of 19. They burnt everything when the churches and that. Paul's first visit was brief and was directed towards the Jewish community. Paul later made a second visit, driven from the synagogue, and settled in the school of Tyrannus for 2 years until the uproar in 58 AD. Acts 19:24-41. Right? Ephesus later became the center for missionary operations throughout Asia. Imitators followed, but without power. Remember the 7 sons of Sceva, Acts 19:12. This is where the magicians were, so you can see these guys sold how they thought they could make money. So the Timothy may have become Ephesus' first bishop, 1 Timothy 1:3. It is here that we find Aquila, Priscilla, and Apollos. According to Eusebius and others, John returned there in 95 AD after Patmos and spent his closing years there. So you can go and study John's history. There's quite an interesting history. He wasn't bald in fat, by the way, or something like that. There's no record of that. After Paul left Ephesus and journeyed through Macedonia, he returned to Miletus for his famed farewell to the Ephesian elders. Right? In 1 Corinthians was penned during his second visit. Paul's epistle to Ephesus was written from Rome. So there's a bit of a later history. The bishop of this was interesting because it's very misunderstood. The bishop of Ephesus was accorded rank and authority of a patriarch over the churches in the province of Asia. In 431 AD, this is nearer to us, Emperor Theodosius II called a general church council at Ephesus to consider the hotly argued question of the time whether the Virgin Mary should be described as the Mother of God, and 200 bishops at this third ecumenical council decided in the affirmative. But don't get this wrong, it's very misunderstood. You'll see now. In 431 AD, summoned by Theodosius, second emperor of the East, the Valesian, third emperor of the West, to resolve the controversy caused by the heresy known as Nestorianism. Nestorius died about 451, Patriarch of Constantinople. Refused to accord the title Mother of God to Mary, the Mother of Jesus Christ. Proponents emphasized the separateness of the human and the divine in Christ, claiming in effect that he was actually two separate persons, the one divine and the other human. No problem with that. Accordingly, Mary was considered the mother of the man, Jesus, not of the divine Jesus. This was opposed to the accepted doctrine that Christ was a single person, at once God and man. Right? Under the leadership of Saint Cyril, the Patriarch of Alexandria, the council deposed Nestorius and condemned his doctrine. It declared that Jesus Christ is true God and true man, and that he has two natures, human and divine, joined in one person. As a logical extension of that view, the council proved the title Greek Theotokos, God bearer. So they never said it was the mother of God. They said she was the God bearer, the mother, the God bearer mother. And then this got twisted around. Right. It's a logical. It's a logical. That is solid ground. There's no problem with that. It's, in other words, they're saying that Jesus was both, and Mary was his mother. So she was the God bearer. That gets twisted later into the title of Mother of God, which of course carries a different connotation. And this is often misunderstood. They never, at this council, they never said that. When you look at the council, you can't find fault with what they wrote. But the way it is applied and twisted, that is faulty. Its chief rival city was Miletus, but alluvial deposits gradually salted up the harbour of Miletus. Ephesus for a while eclipsed its rival in importance. Even in the 1st century, Paul landed at Miletus after one of the many dredgings. After his destruction by the Goths in 262 AD, he never gained his former glory. Jesus' letter is about 35 years later after Paul's departure. We want to understand Paul's departure, his famous touching farewell address to the elders at Ephesus. We can pick it up in Acts 20 and verse 16. For Paul had determined to sail by Ephesus. Okay, so because he would spend the time in Asia for he hastened, if it were possible for him to be at Jerusalem the day of Pentecost. And from Miletus he sent to Ephesus and called the elders of the church. What happened was that Paul wanted to go to the day of Pentecost because it's actually every Jew should be present at that. If you were Jew, so he wanted to go to the day of Pentecost. Well, obviously we know what's going to happen, and we know that he's going to be jailed or whatever. But this is why he wants to rush, because he's got a long way to travel. But he is going by Ephesus, but he's not going to stop in Ephesus. He's going to stop in Miletus. And then he's going to send a messenger, and he's going to call for the elders of the church. And there's two reasons why scholars say he done this. And the first reason is because the harbour, the key harbour, I think, was giving problems. At Ephesus was giving problems. And the second was that he wanted to avoid the crowd. Because obviously when they see Paul, he started the church, and I mean, he's the father founder, and you know, it goes, everyone wants to say something. So if we look at it, that's Ephesus there, and that's let's see. Oh no, yeah, okay, that's Ephesus. That's where the elders have to come from, and this is the place where Paul is. So it's, if you look at it on the map, it's over 20 miles that they had to travel to get to Paul. Okay, so, and when they were come to him, he said unto them, we know from the first day that I came into Asia, after what manner I have been with you at all seasons, serving the Lord with humility of mind, and with many tears and temptations, which befell me by the lying in wait of the Jews, and how I kept back nothing that was profitable unto you, but have showed you, and I have taught you publicly and from house to house. This, what Paul is telling them here, since he came to Asia, he spoke to the people and the church started and everything, he's telling them, the man I've been with you all seasons. He's been through all the seasons, because as we saw in the history, he first went to the Jews, they kicked him out of the temple, and then he went to the schoolhouse, and he was there till 58 AD, until there was a commotion. So he was with him for quite a while, and he had been through all the seasons, and he had been serving the Lord with all humility of mind, and many tears and temptations which befell me by the lying in wait of the Jews. The Jewish community was very against Paul. Jesus says that, Paul is the Gentile teacher. He knows his mission. He knows his mission is to speak to the Gentile. The Jews find a problem with Paul. And that's why a lot of people have a problem that when they say Paul wrote Hebrews. Now, because it's not signed, it's not signified by him. Paul had a certain way of signifying his letter, because you'll see in Corinthians somewhere, I think it's the 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians is actually 3 Corinthians, because there was a problem that one of the letters had got copied and it was a false, and it was a thing. And Paul started signing his letters, and he puts words in there that tells you this is his letter. And the churches knew it, so they knew what to look for to see if it was Paul's. And that's what Paul done. And why a lot of people claim that he wrote Hebrews, which I find very provocative, is because it's unsigned. And it's unsigned because this is what Paul is speaking about here. He's saying the Jews are so against him. Whenever he told them their history, because you must remember, he knew in their history. He was a Jew, and he was in the Roman in the courts. He was very clever, so he could tell the Jews their law, and they hated him for that. And when Paul writes Hebrews, as people say, that's exactly what he's doing. He's telling them. And if he had to sign that, they would kill him. So he didn't want, in that way, that's what they're saying. He didn't want people to know it was him, because he didn't want the Jews to know, because his message was to the Gentile. And Peter recognizes that. He says, Paul has been sent to preach to the Gentile. And Peter gives a lot out about that, and he says, I've been sent to the Jew. But the Jews hated Paul. They wanted to kill him. The Romans took him captive, not because if he'd done something wrong, because the people wanted to kill him. And he was a Roman, he was a citizen of Rome. So they took him captive. And things like that. Yeah. And the Paul is very interesting history, if you can read it, of how the Jews, they laid snares for this guy. They wanted his blood. And the churches knew that, because they could see that. And the elders knew what was going on, and they always used to warn Paul. You always get this feeling that they're warning Paul, don't go to Jerusalem, or don't go to Rome, because they're gonna capture you. They obviously they're planning to capture you. And Paul says, but I've kept back nothing that was profitable unto you. So if it was profitable to the Gentile, he wouldn't keep it back. But he has showed you and have taught you publicly, and from house to house. And from this we get this idea that the first churches were in houses. They weren't churches. They would go to houses. Now Paul was in a school in Ephesus, as we saw by the history thing, that he did go to a school, and obviously they gathered at a certain place. but I think they still went from house to house. And if you look at the thing of from house to house, you will see it's one of the safest ways when you are under when persecution is the house to house meeting. Um, because wherever you gather in big places, they'll know straight away. But from house to house, it was easier for them under persecution and things like that to have meetings. So that's from house to house, and I think I'm going to stop there. I'll carry on from there. This is going to be a short one, as I haven't got much time, and we'll carry on from there, and we'll look at what Paul says to these elders in that time and how it reflects back on the letter, because it's very important to see what he told them then. You remember, this is before the time, so what he told them then and how it reflects in the letter is quite important, because it means they've either listened to him then or they didn't listen to him then. So if you want to go and read it further, you'll find out if they did or didn't, because according to the recommendation they got from Jesus, he tells them whether they did or didn't, and he gives them basically 7 things. So you can go read that, and you can go read the letter further, and then you can see when I speak, and you can automatically, because it'll be fresh in your mind. So we can do that either tomorrow or Friday. Tomorrow I'm quite busy tomorrow, so could be Friday, but over the weekend I definitely will get to it. So thank you for watching. God bless and enjoy your day.